Right now, more than 2 billion cups of coffee are being consumed around the world every single day. It is the second most traded commodity on Earth after oil. More than 500 billion cups are drunk every year, and yet, for most of human history, nobody had ever heard of it. Coffee did not just change what people drank. Coffee changed how people thought. It replaced alcohol as the morning drink of the working world. It created a new kind of public space, the coffee house, where ideas were born, where revolutions were planned, where businesses were founded, where the modern world was essentially invented. But where did coffee come from? The story begins in the highlands of Ethiopia, in a region called Kaffa, from which the word coffee may actually derive. Around 850 AD, according to the most famous legend, a young goat herder named Kaldi noticed something strange about his goats. Kaldi's goats had been eating the red berries of a dark green bush. After eating them, the goats would not sleep. They danced through the night. They were full of energy. Curious, Kaldi tried the berries himself. He felt something he had never felt before. Alert, awake, energized. He brought the berries to a nearby monastery. The monks at the monastery were skeptical. The head monk threw the berries into the fire, declaring them the work of the devil. But as the berries burned, a remarkable aroma rose from the flames. The monks smelled something they had never smelled before. Rich, dark, compelling. They raked the roasted beans from the embers and dissolved them in hot water. The monks drank the liquid, and they stayed awake for hours, alert, focused, energized. For monks who needed to stay awake through long hours of night prayer, this was extraordinary, not the work of the devil. Surely, the gift of God. Coffee had been discovered. For several centuries, coffee remained in Ethiopia. Ethiopian people chewed the berries. They ground them with fat into energy balls that warriors carried on long marches. They made a wine from the fermented pulp, the roasted and brewed drink we recognize as coffee today was still being developed. The full story of coffee was just beginning. By the 14th century, coffee had crossed the Red Sea into Yemen. Sufi mystics in Yemen used coffee to help them stay awake during long nights of prayer and meditation. They called it kahwa, a word that originally meant wine, but was transferred to coffee as the new beverage that gave the same spiritual energy. Yemen became the center of the coffee world. The port city of Mocha on the Yemeni coast became the main export point for coffee to the rest of the world. For centuries, almost all coffee consumed globally came through the port of Mocha. The word mocha, in coffee terminology today, comes directly from this city. From Yemen, coffee spread through the Ottoman Empire to Mecca and Medina, where pilgrims from across the Muslim world encountered it and took it home, to Cairo, to Damascus, to Baghdad. By 1530, the first coffee houses had opened in Damascus. By 1554, two Syrian men opened the first coffee house in Istanbul. A new kind of public space had been born. The Ottoman coffee house was revolutionary. Before the coffee house, public socializing happened at mosques or in private homes, where only the wealthy could host guests. The coffee house was open to everyone, rich or poor, scholar or laborer. For the price of a cup of coffee, any man could sit for hours and participate in public life. Coffee houses spread with extraordinary speed across the Ottoman Empire. By 1600, there were over 600 coffee houses in Istanbul alone. They were called schools of the wise because so much learning and debate happened there, but they also attracted suspicion. Ottoman authorities worried that coffee houses were places where people plotted against the government. In 1511, the governor of Mecca tried to ban coffee. He believed coffee houses were places of moral corruption, where music was played, where games were played, where political sedition was discussed. He closed the coffee houses. He burned the coffee supplies. The ban lasted only a few months. The Sultan in Cairo overruled him. Coffee won. Coffee reached Europe in the early 1600s. Venetian merchants, who traded with the Ottoman Empire, brought coffee back to Venice. At first, many Europeans were suspicious. Some called it the bitter invention of Satan. When coffee reached Italy, a group of Catholic priests asked Pope Clement VIII to ban it. Pope Clement VIII tasted the coffee. He considered it. And then he said, "This devil's drink is so delicious, we should cheat the devil by baptizing it." He gave coffee his papal blessing. Coffee was officially acceptable for Christians to drink. And Europe never looked back. The first coffee house in England opened in Oxford in 1650, run by a Jewish man named Jacob, at a building called the Angel. Within 2 years, a coffee house had opened in London. Within a decade, there were dozens. Within 50 years, there were more than 2,000 coffee houses in London alone. England was transformed. Before coffee houses, what did the English drink? In the morning, beer and ale. Weak beer was safer than the polluted water of English cities. Most English people started their day slightly drunk and stayed that way. When coffee houses replaced the morning ale with coffee, something remarkable happened. People were suddenly alert in the mornings. Historians have argued that the shift from morning alcohol to morning coffee directly contributed to the intellectual flowering called the Enlightenment. The great scientific advances of the 17th and 18th centuries, Newton, Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, many of history's greatest thinkers, did their thinking in coffee houses. Isaac Newton was reportedly a regular at the Grecian Coffee House in London. London coffee houses were also the birthplace of modern business institutions. Edward Lloyd opened a coffee house in 1688 on Tower Street in London. Merchants and ship owners gathered there to discuss shipping news and maritime risks. From Lloyd's Coffee House grew Lloyd's of London, still one of the world's most important insurance markets today. The London Stock Exchange also traces its origins to a coffee house. Jonathan's Coffee House in Exchange Alley was where stockbrokers gathered to buy and sell shares. In 1801, Jonathan's became the London Stock Exchange. The New York Stock Exchange was similarly founded under a buttonwood tree, where brokers had gathered to trade while drinking coffee. Not everyone was happy about coffee houses. In 1675, King Charles II of England tried to ban them. He said coffee houses were places where people spread malicious and scandalous reports against the government. The ban was announced. Within 11 days, it was withdrawn. The public reaction was so fierce that even the king could not close the coffee houses. Women were largely excluded from English coffee houses. In 1674, a group of London women wrote and published the Women's Petition Against Coffee. They complained that their husbands spent so much time in coffee houses that they neglected their families. They also complained that coffee was making their husbands as unfruitful as the deserts from where the drink came. Meanwhile, coffee was transforming France. The first Parisian coffee house, Café de Procope, opened in 1686. It became the meeting place of the French Enlightenment. Voltaire drank, reportedly 40 to 50 cups, of coffee per day there. Rousseau was a regular. Benjamin Franklin, visiting Paris, worked from the Café de Procope. The French Revolution was partly planned in Parisian coffee houses. On July 12, 1789, 2 days before the storming of the Bastille, a journalist named Camille Desmoulins jumped on a café table in the Palais Royal and called the people of Paris to arms. The French Revolution began in a coffee house. Back in the coffee-growing world, something important was happening. The Ottoman Empire and Yemen had maintained a monopoly on coffee for over a century. They did this by making it illegal to export living coffee plants or unroasted beans. Any coffee that left Ottoman or Yemeni ports was roasted first to prevent germination. The monopoly was eventually broken by a Muslim pilgrim from India named Baba Budan. Around 1600, Baba Budan made the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. On his return journey, he secretly hid 7 living coffee beans strapped to his belly under his robes. He planted them in the hills of Karnataka in southern India. Those 7 beans grew into coffee plants. In the Baba Budan hills of Karnataka, the monopoly was broken. Shortly after, Dutch traders managed to obtain living coffee plants from India. The Dutch planted coffee in their colony in Java, in what is now Indonesia. Java became such a major coffee source that the word Java became a synonym for coffee, still used today. From Java, the Dutch brought a coffee plant to Amsterdam Botanical Garden. From that single plant, cuttings were sent to French Martinique in the Caribbean. From Martinique, coffee spread throughout South America. A young French naval officer named Gabriel de Clue made a perilous voyage to transport one coffee seedling to Martinique. From that single seedling, transported by de Clue to Martinique, almost all of South and Central America's coffee industry descended. Brazil, which today produces 1/3 of all the world's coffee, can trace its entire industry to a handful of plants brought from Martinique in the early 1700s. From one Dutch botanical garden, from one Javanese colony, from 7 beans smuggled by a pilgrim. The coffee trade in the Americas, like cotton and sugar, was built on enslaved labor. In Brazil, enslaved Africans worked the coffee plantations from the early 1700s until slavery was abolished in 1888. Brazil was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery, and its coffee economy was one of the main reasons it was so reluctant to do so. Coffee also played an unexpected role in the American Revolution. After the Boston Tea Party of 1773, when American colonists dumped British tea into Boston Harbor, drinking tea became unpatriotic. Americans switched to coffee, a political act that transformed American culture permanently. Americans had been tea drinkers. They became coffee drinkers, and they never went back. The 19th century brought industrial changes to coffee. For most of coffee's history, people bought whole roasted beans and ground them at home or in coffee houses. In 1864, John and Charles Arbuckle of Pittsburgh began selling pre-roasted, pre-packaged coffee in paper bags. For the first time, coffee was a branded consumer product. In 1901, a Japanese-American chemist named Satoru Kato invented instant coffee. In 1938, Nestlé developed Nescafé, a freeze-dried instant coffee that could be stored for years. During World War II, American soldiers were supplied with instant coffee as part of their rations. An entire generation of soldiers came home with a coffee habit. After World War II, American coffee culture became mass market. Diners across America offered free coffee refills. The percolator, then the drip coffee machine, made coffee easy to make at home. By the 1950s, coffee was as American as apple pie, but the quality had suffered. Mass-market coffee was often weak and bland. In 1966, a Dutch coffee expert named Alfred Peet opened a small coffee shop in Berkeley, California. Peet's coffee. He used high-quality beans. He roasted them dark, in the European style. He taught his customers to appreciate real coffee. Among his students were 3 young men who would go on to open a small coffee shop in Seattle. They called it Starbucks. Starbucks opened in 1971. For its first decade, it sold coffee beans, not brewed coffee. Then, in 1983, Starbucks executive Howard Schultz visited Milan. He walked into an Italian espresso bar. He watched the barista. He drank the coffee. He understood immediately what America was missing. He came home and transformed Starbucks into something the world had never seen. Starbucks grew from 11 stores in 1987 to 30,000 stores today in 80 countries. It created a global coffee culture of lattes, cappuccinos, and frappuccinos that had never existed before. It turned coffee from a commodity into an experience, from a drink into a lifestyle, and it sparked a broader specialty coffee movement that changed how the world related to its morning cup. Today, the specialty coffee movement is bringing coffee full circle back to its origins. Coffee farmers in Ethiopia, the birthplace of coffee, are now celebrated for their extraordinary heirloom varieties. Ethiopian coffee commands premium prices globally. For the first time in centuries, the country that gave coffee to the world is finally beginning to profit from that gift. From the highland forests of Ethiopia, where a goat herder noticed his goats dancing, to the Sufi monasteries of Yemen, where mystics stayed awake for God, to the coffee houses of Istanbul, where the Ottoman Empire thought and talked and plotted, to the Royal Society of London, where Newton calculated the laws of the universe over a cup of coffee, to the Café de Procope in Paris, where Voltaire drank 40 cups a day. Coffee did not just wake people up. Coffee woke the world up. It replaced morning alcohol with morning alertness. It created the public space where the Enlightenment was born, where revolutions were planned, where businesses were founded, where the modern world was imagined. The next time you drink coffee, you are continuing a conversation that has been going on for 1200 years. Thank you for watching this story on Storia English. If you enjoyed learning English through this story, please subscribe to Storia English. Every week we bring you a new story from history, told in clear, slow, simple English, so you can improve your listening, vocabulary, and confidence, naturally, without stress. We will see you in the next story.